lion roaring against its captors resonate with a growing chorus of African voices rejecting the suffocating grip of imperialism. And in this moment, Malema's rhetoric finds a powerful echo in Burkina Faso's fearless revolutionary, Captain Ibrahim Traoré, whose own defiance has become a beacon for a continent tired of being pawed at by foreign hands. Speaking at a packed rally in Soweto this past week, Malema didn't mince words. "Our friends will never be the United Kingdom, France, or the USA," he thundered, his voice cutting through the humid air like a machete through colonial lies. "They were never there for us during difficult times. Everywhere America goes, they never go to help. They go to destabilize." The crowd erupted, fists raised, red berets bobbing like a sea of blood-red defiance. It wasn't just a speech. It was a declaration of war against the historical amnesia that has kept Africa shackled to the whims of the West. Across the continent, in the dusty streets of Ouagadougou, Captain Ibrahim Traoré has been singing a similar tune, one that reverberates with the same righteous fury. At the inaugural Alliance of Sahel States (AES) summit in Niamey. Last July, Traoré stood tall, a 37-year-old soldier with the soul of a griot, and laid bare the ugly truth of Africa's exploitation. "This continent has suffered so much and continues to suffer because of imperialists," he said, his words dripping with the weight of centuries. These imperialists have only one cliché in mind: Africa is the empire of slaves. This is how they see Africa. For them, Africans belong to them, our lands belong to them, our subsoil belongs to them. They have never been able to change the logic until today. Let's not be naive, comrades. The parallels here are no coincidence. Malema and Traoré are not just two leaders speaking in isolation. They are the vanguard of a Pan-African awakening that refuses to bow any longer. From Johannesburg to Niamey, the message is clear. Africa is done being the West's playground, its resource depot, its dumping ground for broken promises and predatory policies. These two men, separated by borders but united by vision, are shaking the foundations of a global order that has thrived on our disunity and despair. Malema's latest salvo comes at a time when South Africa itself is wrestling with its own identity, caught between the lingering shadows of apartheid and the neo-colonial tentacles of Western economic control. His assertion that the UK, France, and the USA have never been Africa's allies isn't just rhetoric, it's a historical indictment. Where were they when our ancestors were dragged in chains across the Atlantic? Where were they when colonial armies carved up our lands like a butcher's slab? Where are they now as our children die in mines to extract cobalt for their smartphones, while their governments prop up puppet regimes to keep us in line? Malema's answer is unequivocal. They were never here for us. They were here for themselves. And Traoré, this young captain, who seized power in Burkina Faso not once but twice to wrest his nation from the jaws of chaos, has become the living embodiment of that same rejection. Under his leadership, Burkina Faso has pivoted sharply away from France, its former colonial master, and toward a future defined by African sovereignty. He's expelled French troops, welcomed Russian support, and forged the AES with Mali and Niger, a trio of nations daring to say no to the economic community of West African states, ECOWAS, which many now see as a lapdog for Western interests. At the AES summit, Traoré didn't just speak, he roared. He called out the imperialists for their arrogance, for their belief that Africa's wealth, our gold, our uranium, our oil, is theirs by divine right. They have never changed the logic, he said, and in that moment, he spoke for every African who has watched their homeland bled dry while the West grows fat. The resonance between Malema and Traoré isn't just in their words, it's in their audacity. Malema, with his sharp tongue and unrelenting critique of white monopoly capital, has long been a thorn in the side of South Africa's elite and their foreign backers. Traoré, with his military fatigues and holstered pistol, is a symbol of a new generation of African leaders who refuse to play nice with the powers that have kept us down. Together, they represent a shift, a tectonic movement toward a continent that no longer seeks validation from London, Paris, or Washington. But let's be real, Brothers and sisters, this isn't just a feel-good story of two men talking tough. The stakes are life and death. Malema's speech has rattled cages far beyond South Africa's borders. In the United States, where the administration is scrambling to counter China and Russia's growing influence in Africa, his words are a slap in the face. In France, where President Macron still clings to the delusion of Francafrique, Traoré's defiance and now Malema's echo is a nightmare unfolding in real time. The UK, with its history of looting everything from Nigeria's oil to Zimbabwe's diamonds, must be sweating as it watches this Pan-African fire spread. And spread it will. Because what Malema and Traoré are tapping into isn't just anger, it's a hunger for dignity, a hunger for control over our own destiny, a hunger to rewrite the script that has cast Africa as the eternal victim, the perpetual beggar at the table of global power. When Malema says America destabilizes rather than helps, he's not wrong. Look at Libya, where NATO's bombs turned a thriving nation into a failed state. Look at Somalia, where decades of US meddling have left nothing but warlords and drones. When Traoré calls out the imperialist cliché of Africa as a slave empire, he's not exaggerating. Look at the CFA franc, a colonial currency still chaining West African economies to France. Look at the mining contracts that leave our people in poverty while multinational CEOs sip champagne in skyscrapers. This is the Africa they don't want you to see, an Africa waking up, standing up, speaking up. Malema's speech wasn't just a moment, it was a clarion call, amplified by Traoré's courage. It's a call that's being heard in the markets of Accra, the villages of Darfur, the townships of Nairobi. It's a call that says we don't need the West's crumbs, we'll build our own table. It's a call that says our friends aren't the ones who bombed us, colonized us, enslaved us. Our friends are the ones who stand with us, whether they're in Moscow, Beijing, or right here on this sacred soil. Of course, the detractors will come. They'll call Malema a demagogue, a rabble-rouser stirring up trouble. They'll call Traoré a dictator, a coup leader clinging to power. They'll say their words are dangerous, divisive, a threat to stability. But whose stability? The stability of a world order that keeps Africa on its knees? The stability of a system that thrives on our exploitation? Let them talk, let them squirm. Because every time Malema opens his mouth, every time Traoré stares down the imperialists, they're exposing the rot at the core of that system. And the people, our people, are listening. So here we are, Africa, at a crossroads. Malema and Traoré aren't just leaders, they're mirrors, reflecting our pain, our potential, our power. Their words aren't just speeches, they're battle cries, summoning us to rise. The shockwaves from Malema's latest outburst are still rippling, through the Sahel, through the Horn, through every corner of this continent that has suffered too long under the imperialist boot. And as those waves crash, they carry Traoré's echo. Africa is not the empire of slaves. No, it's not. It's the empire of warriors, of dreamers, of builders. And if the West doesn't see that yet, they will soon. Because we're coming, for our land, for our wealth, for our future, and we're not asking permission. Before I conclude, brothers and sisters, let's listen to the speech from Julius Malema.
Where were the sanctions of America when a child was shot by a farmer in the Northern Cape for picking a flower on his farm, and we were told that this child was mistaken for a monkey? Where was the international community when the racists at the University of Free State fed our mothers who were domestic workers human waste? Why were our people who were stuffed into a coffin alive in Mpumalanga not offered refugee status in America? Comrades, what does the USA have to say about the murderers of Flag Plus who roam our society today freely and have never accounted for their crimes? Why is the International Criminal Court to prosecute Voter Basson, Dr. Death, who used chemical warfare and medicine to poison and kill anti-apartheid activists? Voter Basson, who committed these human rights violations, is sitting comfortably here in South Africa while victims of his biological warfare which violated human rights, suffered the consequences and never saw justice. How can we be expected to reconcile with those who have never acknowledged these crimes and were never held accountable for them? How can we be asked to share our land, our resources, and our future with those who still believe that Orania and Volksstadt are their birthright in Africa, while the mass graves of our people are ignored? These are the people who have never appreciated with how they came to enjoy their wealth and power. People who still see us as servants, as laborers, as conquered people. People who did not even consider themselves Africans until it became convenient to do so, to claim indigenous to our land after calling themselves Europeans for centuries. Before 1994, our compatriots did not consider themselves as Africans and knew that they were Europeans who had acquired land through the theft and conquest. Today, we are told that we are violating property rights when we demand our land from people who called themselves Europeans just 30 years ago. Those who stole our land must face the truth that they acquired land through theft and genocide. Let them explain to us how they can still feel entitled to our land when they've never acknowledged the rivers of blood that were spilled to build their world. Let the ANC explain how they can claim to represent black people while aligning themselves with our former oppressor, selling out the legacy of our martyrs for parliamentary seats and empty slogans of reconciliation with those who still believe they are superior to us. We refuse to forget. Our ancestors are watching. The waters of this Domo Dam remember the blood that fell on this day and will ensure that their sacrifices are never erased. We demand prosecution of apartheid crimes, and that must be where the USA begins its investigation of genocide and violations of human rights. All those Boers who killed our people during apartheid must be arrested. All the army generals of the apartheid army must be arrested. All the apartheid policemen who came here in Sharpeville and killed our people, they must still be prosecuted. Kaspedi bar molato a ubole re abanyaka till today. Comrades, the apartheid regime in South Africa did not fall on its own. It was forced to its knee by the unbreakable resistance of the people and the relentless pressure of the international community. Nations across the world took a stand against racist state by imposing trade sanctions, diplomatic isolation, and sporting boycotts that crippled the apartheid economy and exposed its brutality to the world. It was a Pan-African struggle supported by our fellow African nations who understood that the oppression of one African nation was an attack on the entire continent. This nation sacrificed their own security, stability, and resources to assist in the fight for our liberation. Zambia, under the leadership of Kenneth Kaunda, became a frontline state for the liberation movements, providing a safe haven for exiled ANC and PAC members. The country allowed the ANC to establish its headquarters in Lusaka, offering logistical and financial support despite constant threats and military attacks from the apartheid regime. Zimbabwe, following its independence in 1980, played a crucial role in supporting South African liberation fighters, offering training camps, military aid, and political backing in international forums. Mozambique, under Samora Machel, gave direct military support to the ANC armed wing Umkhonto weSizwe and allowed freedom fighters to use Mozambican territory for training and strategic operations. Mozambique suffered attacks from the South African Defence Force as a result, yet it never stopped its commitment to the anti-apartheid struggle. Tanzania, under Julius Nyerere provided training facilities, refugee, and ideological guidance to the liberation movements. Nyerere was a strong advocate of African unity and used his influence to mobilize support for sanctions against apartheid. Angola, with the support of Cuba, offered military training camps and armed resistance against South African Defense Force. Cuba, led by Commandant Fidel Castro, sent thousands of troops to Angola to fight against the South African military, weaken the apartheid state hold on the regime. This fight was fought successfully to a point where the regime retreated in Colonial. Nigeria imposed an oil embargo on apartheid South Africa and used its diplomatic influence to push for global sanctions. Successive Nigerian governments provided scholarships for South African students and financial assistance to liberation movements. Several countries took decisive action by cutting off trade with apartheid South Africa, refusing to engage economically with a regime that oppressed and murdered black people. The United Nations first called for an arms embargo in 1963, but it was only in 1977 that it became mandatory. As pressure mounted, individual nations took their own bold steps. Sweden, Norway, and Denmark were amongst the first to completely halt trade and investment with South Africa, setting a moral standard for the rest of the world. India was the first country to cut diplomatic ties with South Africa in 1946 and consistently pushed for international isolation of the apartheid state. Canada, Australia, and New Zealand imposed sanctions on trade, investment, and travel against South African officials and businesses in the 80s. The European Economic Community, now EU, imposed a ban on new investment in 1986 and restricted trade with South Africa. These economic restrictions hit the apartheid government where it hurt the most, causing severe damage to industries and forcing white business owners to reckon with the reality that apartheid is unsustainable. One of the most powerful tools used against apartheid South Africa was its expulsion from the global sporting community. For a nation that took pride in its sports, this was a devastating blow to its international image. South Africa was banned in soccer, in rugby, and in cricket, and teams of nations opposed to apartheid, and their athletes refused to compete with teams representing apartheid South Africa. These international sanctions, along the armed resistance and internal uprising led by the liberation movements, created unbearable pressure that apartheid could not withstand. It is for this reason, comrades, that we are so adamant on our position to support the people of Palestine and call for boycott and sanction against the apartheid Israeli state, which is committing genocide. It is because our nation itself is a product of international solidarity. The question we must ask is, where was Israel and USA, which seek to call us a nation that commits human rights violation today, when the world turned its back on apartheid South Africa? We must never forget those who resisted sanctions, those who continue to trade with and arm the apartheid regime. The United States, the United Kingdom under Margaret Thatcher, and Israel were amongst the worst offenders actively supporting the apartheid regime. Let us never forget that the USA classified our freedom fighters as terrorists. The US did not just support apartheid with words. It armed and funded the regime. During the Cold War, America saw the racist apartheid government as a strategic ally against communism, choosing to back white supremacy over justice. The CIA assisted in the capture of Nelson Mandela in 1962, handing him over to the apartheid regime. Washington ensured that South Africa's economy remained functional, allowing companies like General Motors, IBM, and Coca-Cola to continue business while black South Africans suffered under the boot of operation. Comrades, the USA sold weapons to the apartheid government, helped them develop nuclear technology, and even gave intelligence to the South African military, which it used to target anti-apartheid activists. The American government's policy mirrored its own history of racial oppression. Just as the USA armed the South African apartheid regime, they now fund Israel's genocide against Palestine, ensuring that another racist settler colonial state can continue its domination. Comrades, we must never succumb to pressure of America. America has never helped us with anything, even during apartheid. They cannot threaten us now with sanctions. Everywhere else America goes, you must know they never go to help those people. They go to destabilize those countries. They did the same thing in Libya. They did the same thing in Iraq. They did the same thing in Afghanistan. Now they want to come to South Africa and destabilize it. We must unite against American imperialism and colonialism. We must not be intimidated by Elon Musk and everybody who stands with him. All those who are offered an opportunity to go to America because there is a genocide against them in South Africa, you are free to go. The borders are opened for racists to leave South Africa. We have no home for racists in South Africa. Our friends will never be United Kingdom. Our friends will never be France. Our friends will never be USA. They were never there for us during difficult time. Palestine was there for us during our difficult time. Palestine associated with us during difficult time. We will always support the people of China, the people of Russia, the people of Venezuela, the people of Haiti, and all the progressives in Cuba who stood with us. Today, even when we are confronted with serious sanctions, we are not scared because we know we are direct beneficiaries of international solidarity. I call on you to continue paying solidarity with the people of Palestine. It doesn't matter what Trump will do to us. We will die next to the Palestinian people. We will be buried next to the graves of the Palestinians. Comrades, we support Russia because Russia equipped us, Russia trained us, gave us education, gave us money to fight with the apartheid government. We will never stand with Ukraine, and we don't want Zelensky to visit South Africa because he's a puppet of the Western forces. Comrades, our people are being killed in Sudan. Life is being lost. No one is saying anything because it's an African life. We must fight and always continue to raise the plight of the children and women of Sudan. We must no longer allow a situation where blacks kill other black people because they want riches of that country. Africans must unite everywhere and do not find it easy to kill one another during these difficult times. Comrades, we have seen the killings in Mozambique, and they should know, the people of Frelimo in Mozambique, that if there is instability in Mozambique, it's going to affect South Africa. That's why we will not allow that there is an instability in Mozambique. We want peace in Mozambique. We want free and fair elections in Mozambique. We want free and fair elections in Zimbabwe. We call on Zimbabweans to stop being cowards and confront Mnangagwa's government and go and reclaim their own country. They cannot continue to stay in South Africa as if they are enjoying life here. You will never enjoy life in somebody else's country. You can only enjoy life if you go home and remove ZANU-PF from power and arrest those who are stealing the gold of Zimbabwe.
Africa stands at the precipice of a new dawn, and the voices of Julius Malema and Captain Ibrahim Traoré are the thunder announcing the storm. Their words, unyielding, unflinching, have torn through the veil of Western deceit, exposing a truth we've known but too often silenced. The UK, France, and the USA are not our saviours. They are our saboteurs. From Soweto to Ouagadougou, the message is resounding. We will no longer be the West's empire of slaves. This is our moment, our reckoning, a time to reclaim our lands, our wealth, our dignity. Malema and Traoré are not just speaking for South Africa or Burkina Faso, they're speaking for every African ready to rise. The shockwaves they've unleashed are not a tremor to fear, but a rhythm to march to. So let us march, comrades, together, fearless, forward, until the chains of imperialism lie shattered, and Africa stands as the empire of its own